Okay, I'd like to call this Finance and Legislation meeting to order. Mr. Bayes?
I'm here.
Mr. Bigley is here. Mr. Ballack is not present at the moment. We got one piece of legislation I'm going to roll into, and this is an ordinance authorizing the auditor to transfer the sum of $6,000 from the 2023 general fund budget category 100, 9100, 59003, transfer to elderly van, to the revenue categories 2650000 47101 and declaring an emergency. Motion to bring it up.
I'll make a motion to bring it up.
I will second that. Thank you. That is it for legislation. Anybody have anything else for finance and legislation this evening? Okay. Meg? Anything else on the agenda? Okay, I've been told Nick, it's Nick,
Yes, sir.
is here from Mill Creek Park.
Or
Either way is fine. I just want to say
You can come up
it's
here
okay
if
for
you want to.
everybody that he speaks tonight on the deer situation and
Sure.
to kind of clarify any maybe misinformation that we have gotten or no information more or less that we have got.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have. It's a pretty complicated topic, so.
Okay.
Anything specific? You just want me to kind of dive
Yeah,
into
Just
the
was
basics?
there any studies done at Yellow Creek at all?
Yeah, so the infrared flyover we conducted in January of '22 included Yellow Creek Park. There were 80 deer within park boundaries detected on that survey. So in terms of density for the available acres, that's very high. Ideally, you want to be 10 to 20 deer per square mile. Yellow Creek being smaller acreage is only about 0.12 square miles. So as you can imagine, you pack 80 deer into that.
But the thing is that park goes all the way to the lake, and there's woods around the lake. I never, ever, ever seen 80 deer in that park.
Yeah.
Me either.
That's totally reasonable.
And I live right by it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you would certainly never see 80 at a time. You can see them spaced out, groups of 3, 4, 5.
No, what's to say that's not the same deer?
Well, you fly over
If
it.
there's a group of 5 deer,
Yeah.
you see them one day, maybe you see them again in a week.
Well, the survey was flown at one time.
I just don't believe it.
When they do a flyover, they take a picture, infrared picture of the whole
Yeah,
area,
I
and
know,
then they can count
I know, I
them.
understand that, I just
I mean-
don't believe it, 'cause I don't see it.
I mean, there's always some room for error. No survey method is 100%. The surveyor gave us an 85% or greater confidence interval on his work. The night of the survey, we had really cold temperatures, sub 10 degrees. We had snow cover on the ground. Really ideal conditions for such a survey. Any survey method is simply a snapshot in time. So you can repeat that survey a day later, a week later, a year later. You're going to get varying figures. But any way you slice it, densities are certainly above where they should be.
Now I'll be honest, we see a ton at my house.
Do you?
We actually seen a pack probably a month ago of 11 at one time. When me and my daughter were walking. Now, we enjoy it. I'm not complaining about it. We obviously enjoy it, me and my daughter.
But that's not part of the park across the street from you,
Yeah.
is it?
Oh, yeah.
Yellow Creek.
Yeah, now they come up out of there, which again, we've always enjoyed seeing them through the yards and, you know what I mean, it's not a hindrance to us, but we see them quite a bit. But we've seen them quite a bit other years too. So I really wouldn't say one is any different than the other. It's more or less probably how much we're outside, But we did, probably a month ago, we seen a pack of 11.
How many are we talking about
So on
in
the
Yellow Creek?
80 deer were detected on the infrared flyover we did within Yellow Creek.
So that flyover, it's just at one time, you said, and how long does it take? Like, is it just like an hour? Like, do you go back and forth, or like, is it just one swoop?
Yeah, so typically you would run transects. I don't know how many transects were ran for Yellow Creek because it's so narrow. It may have been one pass. I don't know that for sure.
Okay.
So yeah.
How many is too many? Now 80s, we've been told for the last couple of years that we have too many deer in the park. I get calls, since I started, I get calls all the time from neighbors who abut the park about the deer destroying their property, destroying their gardens, destroying their everything.
Yeah.
How many is your 80 is, so even if it was 50, 60 deer, that's still too many.
Correct.
Is what you're,
Yeah, you can cut those numbers in half or by 2/3 and it's still too many. So what we're shooting for really is what's called ecological carrying capacity. So what that means is once deer populations get above a certain threshold, above ecological carrying capacity, they start negatively impacting the environment. So that's the Metro Parks perspective. We want to, manage natural resources with the best interest of forest health, which also translates to other species of wildlife, and frankly the deer themselves as well. So that's our management priority.
Have you looked into other ways of doing that other than killing the deer?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we are only given options that are approved by Division of Wildlife. Division of Wildlife is, the state agency that has authority over wildlife management. So currently, what they say, you have 3 options. You can do nothing, but once a decision is made to manage, you're left with 2 options. You can hunt in a traditional sense, or you can do what's called like targeted removal, where you use like trained marksmen to come in and more efficiently remove the deer. That would be what we'd be leaning towards recommending in a park like Yellow Creek, because it is more urban. Hunting in a traditional sense is not feasible. So there are alternatives out there, such as chemical birth control or surgical sterilization. Those have been studied and attempted by many other organizations. There's even a couple projects in Ohio, but ultimately they were proved to not be effective at managing deer populations in wild herds. So if you had a enclosed population, sure, you can maybe look at something like that, but ODNR does not even permit that as an option currently. If there is the possibility of a good viable research project that would push the needle forward in fertility control research, they would consider it, but that chance is pretty low.
Is this the first time that Mill Creek has had to do something like this? Like this has never been done before here?
So, yes and no. So, in the main park, there were flyovers done in the late 90s, early 2000s. They showed lesser numbers, of course, but they were still showing populations 5 times where they should be, around 100 deer per square mile in the main park, at least a portion of the main park, I should say. They surveyed the golf course block from like Shields Road to 224 and Huntington Woods and Hitchcock Woods, which are the facilities directly south of 224. So that was the only focus then. In response to the survey results and the ecological damage that we're seeing, they did institute a hunt for a few years in Hitchcock Woods, Huntington Woods. 1 year they eventually included the golf course block. That was ended in 2001, and no survey or no management happened until the present day. So for Yellow Creek, we have no previous data or management.
And this is something they do all over the place, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's certainly nothing new. Many parks and municipalities across the state and the nation are dealing with this issue. In terms of metro parks,
Could you tell us any negative impact to the deer if we didn't do this? Are there drawbacks as far as their health or anything like that as well?
so in terms of herd health for the deer, it would come down to available resources. So there's only so much food on the landscape that controls their body condition, the reproductive rates, things of that sort. So eventually they will hit a ceiling.
So wouldn't they move on? Looking for food?
Where would they go
Our gardens.
from here? Yeah.
I'll show you a picture. This is my backyard about 2 years ago. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon. There's 5 of them. That's 2:30 in the afternoon.
There's a ton on Youngstown Poland Road when I go to work in the morning.
Yeah.
And I drive school bus, and in the morning when I go down through Wetmore and stuff, I've seen half a dozen get down there. So, in middle afternoon, they're starting to get into the neighborhoods.
Yeah, we actually see quite a bit of them down by, like State Street.
Oh,
If you go down by like, TC Ready Mix and you're going towards Youngstown, we see quite a bit of them. We always have to
What
be
is the range
careful.
of the deer? How far will they roam?
It depends. Typically, your males will roam farther, especially during breeding season. Family groups of females, typically you're pretty tight. Maybe a square mile or so. That all depends on, in an urban situation, it could be lower. In a more typical rural area, it might be a little bit larger than that.
That explains them coming on into our neighborhoods.
Yeah,
Everything
they
else.
certainly don't know property lines. They're not going to stay in the park. That's why when I talk about it being the survey being a snapshot in time, that night under those weather conditions, it seems like the deer were in the park. During that time of year, late in the year, cold conditions, they tend to congregate in large groups, and they'll seek out the best thermal cover. So that's likely in the park.
So if we don't take care of this, chances are that they'll pretty much kill all the good stuff growing and
Yeah. So
invasive plants
I mean,
will take over.
what is it that we would see happening now that would indicate that there are too many deer in Yellow Creek?
So really what you want to lean on are ecological parameters. So you're looking at things like native hardwood tree regeneration, spring wildflowers, things of that sort to gauge, is our ecosystem, is our forest being impacted by deer browsing.
Okay, so other than counting the number of deer, has that been done in Yellow Creek to assess those things?
In Yellow Creek, no, not yet. This summer, we're going to turn our focus more towards, gathering that ecological data.
Okay.
To
Will
use.
we have access to that data? Will it
Absolutely.
be printed on
Yeah,
the population, what needs to be done?
yeah.
Is it true that they're, for the, say snipers, basically, is what they are, you're gonna pay them $1,000 a deer?
No. So there's no set cost per deer. How it would work is you work with USDA Wildlife Services. We would be reimbursing them for staff time, equipment usage, and butchering fees. So every deer that gets taken will be butchered and donated to local food banks.
So the processing fee to process the deer, more or less.
So processing, the hard cost that I can say is processing is $111 per deer,
And who pays for that?
the Metro Parks.
So the city doesn't have to come up with one dime.
We're not asking you for any money, what we're asking you for is permission. As we all know, Metro Parks does not own Yellow Creek, we lease it, we would need your permission.
So honestly though, in most places that Metro Parks do own their own land, they don't lease it, correct? Your rules supersede ours. In this instance, they generally don't because we lease you the land. But for Youngstown, for places like that, the Ohio Department of Resources rules will supersede the city regulations.
So as natural resource manager, that's kind of outside my expertise.
Well, when I looked into it, that was kind of what I found. The general is,
Well, I think Youngstown is fighting that there's no shooting of weapons in the city.
Correct.
And that's what they're gonna, kinda,
They have stated that. I know other metro parks, Cleveland, face the same thing, and I believe they were successful in saying that their rules superseded, because we are our own political entity. I'm not, that's above my expertise, but I do.
That was my knowledge of it.
and that's dangerous.
What time of year, what time of day, if we decided to go through with this, would all this happen?
Yeah, so this type of work will happen in late fall into the winter. I mean, we'd be talking probably 1 or 2 nights worth of work in Yellow Creek. You know, it's a small property in comparison to like Mill Creek proper. Deer numbers are lower, so it would be pretty quick. Exact timing, we'd have to figure that out with USDA and schedule it and everything. Right now, we're thinking of probably like November, December for the main park. You know, maybe we do Yellow Creek at the same time. Maybe it would be later in the year. But once the time comes, it would be 1 or 2 nights worth of work.
What's the cleanup process on? I mean, obviously they're breaking up. Hey, we could wake up in the morning and
Yeah, you're
the
gonna
door will be, or the deer will be sitting on their front porch dead or whatever, blah, 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 you know.
be. It was more or less, you know, obviously the deer has to be gutted or field dressed
Right.
right then.
They're worried about dragging it somewhere, blood through this and that, blah, 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 more.
The word more, I
pesticides,
would say,
everything
about
else.
leaving the remains
Yes.
of the deer down.
So,
It seemed like they would probably get eaten by another animal relatively quick.
so the deer will get removed in its entirety from the field. It won't be field dressed in the park.
On the night it was shot.
On the night it was shot. So, you know, USDA, gonna be working at night. They would, you know, harvest a deer or a few deer. They would remove them from the field. They would take them to a separate, you know, facility to be weighed, aged. They're weighed whole. So you have that data. Then they're dressed and prepared for the butcher, then transported to the butcher that same night.
So if you got a deer that you way back in the woods, how you gonna get it out? You got the equipment to remove it? And
So, you know, USDA would be involved with, you know, selecting the sites where it would happen. Mill Creek proper, we have roads, we have hike and bike lanes that they can drive. That is the most efficient way to conduct such an operation. That's what they want to do in Mill Creek proper. That's obviously not the case here in Yellow Creek, so it'd probably be more like sites would be pre-selected for ease of access of, yes, we could get deer out of this location, and then go from there, because we don't have roads, you know,
Gotcha.
bisecting the park.
And they're not looking to get rid of every single deer, just to pretty much thin the population so it doesn't become ecological.
Correct, and it would be over time. It's not one fell swoop. It would be, you know, small progressions annually until you get down to maintenance levels of close to where you want to be for the ecological carrying capacity.
So you say we have 80 deer in there, how many would you take this year?
So we're still working through that, but it would be pretty low. You know, some of the metro parks has a very similarly sized park, and I believe they request, you know, 10 tags per year or so. Maybe because it's year one, that might vary a little bit. It might be a little bit more, a little bit less, but you know, we're not going to go in and take all 80 at once, or even 50 or 60. I would guess it would be 20 or less in year one.
So you did this survey in 22?
Yeah,
So who's to say there's not 150 in there?
there could be.
When would you do your next survey on it?
We're looking-
Before you would send these sharpshooters out?
So we'd be looking, right now, we're looking at this coming January for a repeat survey.
Now, will we be able to get data from that and show us that too?
But they're looking to do it prior to getting that data, correct?
Yeah, you know, year one, you know, we would operate off of what data we do have. Again, it's pretty small amounts, pretty conservative amounts for year one to get started. And then we would continue to do surveys and learn from.
So this would be over the course of years, thinning this out not taking all at once, but like you said, you have 1 or 2 nights where more than likely you would be in the park that year. You might take out 20 deers, and then the following year readjust and see that you might need to take out another 10 or another 20 and kind of go from there.
Producing.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, that's the thing, though, once you take out a couple bucks and everything else, they don't reproduce at the same rate.
Who's to say they ain't gonna come from Pennsylvania and just?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying in general.
You don't know.
That's your intentions from what I guess I'm gathering.
Correct, yeah, it's, you know, it's slow over time, you know, some folks out there think that we're gonna go in one fell swoop, take every deer that was on the survey. That's not, it wouldn't be feasible financially or practically, but it certainly would be our goal. It's a slow process to slowly trim things back to where we want them to be. Ideally, there's a lot of unknowns that are gonna be in this, we're gonna learn over time. In general, once deer management or any active wildlife management starts, it never really stops, because once you know, say we do this for a handful of years, get to where we want to be, and we stop. Well, in 5 more years, you're back to square one. So there's always maintenance, but once you get to maintenance, the removals are, you know, very, very low in comparison. You know.
What's the accuracy on the USDA sharpshooters?
So they do this all over. The team we're working with, they work all over Northern Ohio. USDA as a whole, they're all over the nation doing this type of work. They're very thorough in their safety measures. They only take shots from elevated positions for safe bullet trajectory. They utilize you know, thermal imaging, night vision, things of that sort to be safe and be accurate at night. I don't have accuracy rate, but they're very good at their jobs. They're very thorough. They have an immaculate safety record. Again, they do this work in other cities and parks all over the state. They do so with you know, a great record for safety in terms of property damage and definitely personal injury.
Are you getting any complaints, say like up at the park, up in Youngstown area and this and that from the people? You know, about removing these deer and this and that?
So yeah, we have people call or write in from both sides. Some people don't want to see management happen, but it's probably close to 50-50 that we get, you know, people or neighbors are saying, you know, yeah, we're seeing impacts to our property. We think there's a problem, and they're, you know, thanking us and encouraging us for taking this step.
We've had a lot of people, I know you've watched social media, where there's a group out there, the Save the Deer, and there's a lot of people from Youngstown, but now there's another group that are in support of Mill Creek, and when they post onto the Struthers sites, these Struthers people seem to collectively want the deer gone. They're jumping all over the Save the Deer people. I've been receiving phone calls in support of thinning out the population because they're more aware of things, I guess.
Yeah, we did do a public survey on our website after our first meeting. Many people indicated Yellow Creek as their most highly visited property. Many of them were positive. The survey in total came out about, it was like 62% in favor. That's pretty typical for what other cities are seeing and such. The Vindicator also did an independent survey. They did a couple of them, and they came out almost exactly the same, 60-40, 62% or so.
60% in favor of removing deer.
Isn't there also like diseases too that the deer can carry once their population gets so?
For sure, there's definitely some concern there with disease. More so that you know, if a disease enters a population when population densities are high, it could really drastically impact that population more so than we would want from a management perspective. You know, something like EHD or hemorrhagic disease, they can come in and really impact a population up to like 90% of a population will be gone in a year, and that's not what we want.
Yeah.
So we want it to be slow and controlled and manageable. Other things like CWD, chronic wasting disease, it's not a known threat in our region currently. It is in Ohio. Something like that would be, it's more of a long-term concern. It takes several years to develop in the deer. but it's 100% fatal, and it's actually caused by a prion that damages the brain. And once those prions are shed into the environment from saliva, feces, things of that sort, they actually persist in the environment for like decades. It never really goes away. So it's definitely something you don't want to have introduced to your park, and having manageable deer populations would certainly help prevent something like that.
Is there any baseline that you're going by as terms of the number of deer either in, well, we'll just talk about Yellow Creek. I mean, has there been any surveys prior to this?
Prior to this, no.
So this is the first one?
First one, yeah.
So we know that, but we don't know how many deer were there 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 50 years ago.
No. Yeah, I have some historical stuff for a portion of the main park, but nothing for Yellow Creek historically.
Okay. I mean, I was 10 years old, I saw deer at St. Nick's. You know, my father-in-law lived on Winnie Drive. He's had deer in his backyard, and I mean, we're going back, I'm 63, so, 50 years ago for me and my father-in-law, seeing deer, outside of the park in a residential area, that had to be at least 30, 35 years ago. So.
It's kind of telling because in terms of history of deer in Ohio, we nearly wiped them, like we did extirpate them from the state in the early 1900s by market hunting and overharvest and things like that. They came back around the 30s, slowly rebuilt populations. In like 1970, there was only 17 to 20,000 or so deer statewide. The population peaked around 2008 to 2010, around 780,000. Today it hovers around 680 to 700,000. But you see, in the last 50 years, there's been a exponential jump in statewide populations. So it's really not that long of a time period.
So, say for example, you have any area in which you go in, you thin the herd. It just seems to make sense that it would, if there was new area or for deer to go to, that there were fewer and more resources, that deer would go there again. So I guess, I'm thinking along the lines of, you take 20 deer this year, they're going to replenish themselves. And, as if, no matter what you do, they're always going to be there.
Yeah, that's definitely a consideration. So, you go in and you take X amount in year one, you're always going to be dealing with recruitment factors. So that's immigration.
You said the management stays there all the time though. You're gonna have to do it every year.
Correct. That's why management is perpetual, because you're always facing that recruitment from immigration. You create a vacuum. Deer are going to move in if they're in close proximity. Fawns are going to be born every spring, so you're always going to be fighting that recruitment factor. But over time, you slowly trim that back to where you want it to be or close
Okay.
to it.
So I guess once you reach a saturation point of deer that the ecosystem can no longer support that, then you don't have a deer. You don't have to worry about more deer coming because you've already got as many as the ecosystem can handle.
Yes, under normal circumstances, I don't know how pervasive feeding is in Struthers. I know around the main park, it's very common for them to be fed. I've had some people say that, hey, I put out 1,100 pounds of corn last year.
Mm-hmm.
So in urban, suburban situations where feeding is very high, you can actually artificially elevate the carrying capacity of the environment from that additional feed. So,
Right.
so there is always a ceiling, whether that's naturally occurring food sources or artificial ones, but it's pretty common in urban, suburban areas for that to be higher than what nature would intend because of feeding and landscape plants and gardens and things of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
So can we get a program like this for geese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was 10 years ago.
So, I mean, Yeah, they
I
do.
get calls about that all the time
Yeah.
too.
It can all go. I hate that thing.
And we have, in the main park for geese, we do annual,
Live
nest,
catch.
nest monitoring and egg addling, so you go in and
You oil the eggs.
you oil the eggs and, you place them back in the nest, it tricks the
If you can
female.
get to 'em.
It's a challenge, but again, we team up with USDA Wildlife Services, the same team we'd be working with here, and they complete that for us, and, we do, a little bit of it in, Yellow Creek there by the lodge. There's usually only maybe a nest or two there. But,
What's oiling eggs?
there's, it's called egg addling, so you could oil the eggs, you could puncture them and kind of stir them up, or, there's a few different, methodologies there, but essentially you're rendering the egg infertile. You place it back in the nest. The female doesn't realize it's infertile. She continues to sit on the nest for the normal incubation period. By the time she realizes that the eggs are not fertile, it's too late in the year to re-nest, and she's unsuccessful for the year, and you can keep populations in check that way.
So how, if this was something that council wanted to look at, I know you've given us a lot of the other ordinances where it just added a line about the USDA and everything. What would be the time frame for that to be done? Because I'm assuming if this is something that council wanted to do, this wouldn't be an emergency passage. This would be something we'd have to take for readings.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so, we're talking operations will be happening, next winter. Currently, ODNR wants, kind of our finalized permit request somewhere around September. If we had to do a separate, if we need more time, we could probably separate out Yellow Creek separately from the main park, or perhaps ask for additional later in the year, but talking with them recently, that's kind of the timeline they gave me.
Okay. And we're on recess in July and August.
As far as the sharpshooters are concerned, are there guidelines as far as how far away from a dwelling they have to be in terms of where they can shoot from?
So, surprisingly, there actually is no law in Ohio for that.
Okay, I know when we was done, it used to be, I thought it was 500 feet.
So, yeah.
I thought something similar, we asked ODNR law enforcement, and they actually said there is no law in the books for that.
Oh, okay.
Which was kind of surprising. So in terms of USDA, I mean, they would follow whatever guidelines we would provide to them, but typically they are in close quarters if need be. I mean, they are working in other cities, residential areas. They are very comfortable and capable of working in close quarters. Again, always ensuring safe bullet trajectories and things of that sort. But
Would they be targeting sick deer or the thin deer? Would they be targeting that population of deer first, or would they? Is there?
Not so much. I mean, we are leaning more towards antlerless deer. You get the damage permit. I believe only 25% of the deer can be antlered. But again, the goal is always, females. They would be most reproductively important to remove from the population. So it'd be more of targets of opportunity, leaning towards mostly female harvest.
Any other questions?
I don't have any. And I know
Do
we talked.
need an ordinance or just a round table?
No.
We need to change our current ordinance with modifications of just a couple lines.
And these are all Northeast Ohio
Yeah,
ordinances too.
I
so
gave
it's-
you paper, if you look at, like, number one, you just added a little bit, basically a line saying ODNR can come in and do it. It's a simple line added to our current ordinance.
but very specific
Yeah.
as well, so it's not like anybody,
We're not opening it up to everybody,
It's-
Right, just
just
structures.
ODNR.
just, yeah.
Yeah, so it would hold true for any other situation, but essentially an exception for, this type of work to happen.
Okay, well, if there's not any other questions, you got any more?
Nick, if you have a number or anything that they, I know it's on their website, but if you guys have any other questions, I know him and Aaron Young both, they answer very, very quickly. So if you have any questions or anything pops up and you're talking to any of the residents and you want an answer or you want the correct information, because there's a lot of false information on some of these social media sites, and you want correct information, they respond very well.
Yeah, I don't think I actually have any business cards on me, but I can write my information down from somewhere.
That'd be a good idea.
We'll get it to you next.
All right, just drop some cards off here, whatnot, whatever you have to do, and then, we can get at our meeting next week, so. Okay,
Thanks for coming.
yeah, thanks for coming, appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks for listening.
For all the information. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna take over Dallas's job here, and ask for an adjournment to the finance legislation.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Meeting adjourned.
Mr. Milano.